Angela was strolling in the park late in twilight, having just closed her textbooks after a grueling study session. Her mind overflowed with information, and she regretted not choosing a more suitable field of study when she was younger. Now, acquiring new knowledge felt like climbing an insurmountable hill. After hours of intense reading, all Angela wanted was to breathe in some fresh air. Ignoring the late hour and her husband's concerns, she ventured to the park near their home. The street lamps fought off the darkness, and after being cooped up indoors, the outside air felt invigorating. She found an unoccupied bench and took a seat. A distance away, a couple leisurely walked down the pathway. Not wanting to interrupt their peaceful stroll, Angela closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. She listened to the cicadas casting their enchanting spells, but her brow furrowed in confusion. A feeble squeak cut through the harmonious symphony. The sound belonged to something small and in distress. Angela sharpened her hearing, rose, and moved toward the source of the squeaking. Her feet left the pathway and ventured into the grass, away from the comforting glow of the street lamps. The darkness crept in, but she persisted. The cries increased in volume, followed by a rustling noise in the grass. She turned on her cell phone flashlight and was astounded to spot a tiny squirrel. The creature froze under the harsh light, appearing alarmed and desolate. Searching the nearby trees revealed no sign of a nest or other squirrels. The thought of leaving the little one alone in the cold night was unbearable. Stray dogs and cats could easily prey on the helpless creature. Without hesitation, Angela scooped up the squirrel in her hands and hurried home. At the entrance, she encountered her anxiously waiting husband, who was stepping into his shoes. Upon seeing her, he sighed with relief. "I was getting ready to come find you," he confessed. "It's pitch black outside, and you're out strolling in the park." "And what's that?" he queried, eyeing the squirrel in surprise. "Found it beneath a tree," Angela replied. "It must have fallen and was whimpering all alone. I couldn't just leave it." "Maybe the kind thing would have been to leave it," her husband suggested nonchalantly. "Realistically, it won't survive without its mother's care. You're just delaying the inevitable." "I will look after it," Angela declared defiantly. "All right, to each their own. As if you don't have your own issues to tackle," grumbled her husband. Angela carefully placed the scared baby inside a small box and promptly searched online for how to feed squirrels. Although she had been overwhelmed with information just an hour earlier, nothing disrupted her determination now. She fetched a syringe from the medicine holder, extracted milk from the fridge, and carefully fed the tiny creature. The baby squirrel eagerly drank, tightly clutching the syringe with its tiny paws. Angela prepared a warm resting place with a plush sweater in the box and gently placed the fed squirrel on top. When she peeked at the squirrel before retiring, she witnessed an endearing sight. The baby had nestled itself inside the sweater sleeve, popping its snout out and snoring soothingly. Her husband simply grunted and dozed off. A few hours later, he was roused by a blaring alarm. Dazed, he observed his wife moving around. She quickly stopped the intrusive alarm and proceeded to feed the tiny guest. "This is not fun anymore," he groaned, returning to sleep. The little guest had to be fed multiple times throughout the night, leaving them both weary and cranky in the morning. Angela even arrived late for her examination, and despite being on leave, work kept hounding her. A dilemma stuck in her mind, whether to take the squirrel and milk along or leave them behind, hoping things would turn out all right. After contemplating, she decided it would be a shame to lose the baby animal after all they'd been through. She prepped filled syringes with detailed notes. To save the hassle of carrying it in her bag, she slipped into a hoodie with a big pocket. The tiny squirrel, who had just had its breakfast, fit comfortably and quickly dozed off. The little squirrel slept the entire journey to the university and throughout the opening remarks of the examiners. Angela offered to answer first to finish early and attend to the squirrel. Angela's husband was indeed right. Troubles were aplenty. However, now Angela wasn't anxious about facing the examiners, but about preserving the comfort of the baby squirrel. Her response was interrupted as the tiny squirrel stirred awake, peering out and inciting surprise among the evaluators. As soon as the engaging little face showed itself from her pocket, everyone's attention instantly shifted. Angela was affectionately referred to as a young mother and easily achieved top marks. Such recognition came unexpectedly, but happily. Her own progeny was already attending a college in the town next door, making her forget that young mothers could earn discounts. Delighted with a ledger full of excellent grades, she narrated her success to Stas, who chuckled, believing it would have been easier to ace the test independently than to lose sleep nursing the small animal. Then her husband stunned her with an announcement. His mother was planning an evening visit. His mother-in-law barely tolerated her. They took an instant dislike to one another. The mother-in-law often expressed her son's poor luck out loud, critiquing Angela on every facet, from her looks to her cooking prowess. Despite this, Stas found his mother's disapproval amusing and prohibited anyone from disrespecting Angela around him. However, the moment he was out of earshot, his mother unleashed her criticism. She savored nagging about the slightest dust on the shelves, unclean windows, or messy papers in her grandchild's room. This never failed to unsettle Angela, prompting her to clean thoroughly before any guests arrived. On the way home, she procured a cage for the tiny squirrel. To avoid accidentally stepping on the baby during her cleaning frenzy, she set it inside the cage on her desk. The little one explored its new environment with interest. Meanwhile, Angela busied herself, meticulously cleaning wherever her mother-in-law could lay her eyes. She ordered the evening meal from the nearest eatery. Critiques would surely come, but at least she would not feel bothered that she had not cooked it. Stas got home around the same time as his mother. He showed his approval when he saw the cage with the baby squirrel. The mother-in-law, on the other hand, was aghast. As soon as her son was out of sight, she launched into her tirade against Angela. Why promote such unclean standards? This house is always a mess, and you are now bringing in dirty animals. I cleaned everything, Angela stated, worn out. As if your cleaning will prevent diseases that this creature carries. Do you want to give my son a severe illness or something worse? I've persistently tried to convince him that you're an inappropriate choice. I swear, I will get him to see sense. You are not going to be in this home for long. Angela didn't need to respond. Her spouse came back just when needed and didn't step out until late evening. Just so you know, I am better at cooking, the mother-in-law commented, sampling the cafe cuisine. Sure, Mom, Stas responded nonchalantly. He grasped Angela's scheme promptly and was totally fine with it because his wife's emotional comfort held more value than home-cooked meals for him. But his mother was not easily pacified. She persisted with her criticisms, making Angela's hands tight with aggravation. Eventually, even Stas couldn't stand it. Mom, it's getting late. Shouldn't you be leaving? I will be off soon, she casually replied. My child, I only want your well-being and good living conditions. Enough, Stas retorted. Quit nitpicking on Angela. Can't you see this? He grabbed his spouse's hand and pointed at the wedding band. I chose my life with her myself, and I am delighted. As long as that ring stays on her finger, we are united. Do not hurt my spouse's feelings. Otherwise, you should avoid visiting altogether. Oh dear, his mother moaned. I'm not hurting anyone's feelings, just sharing some friendly advice. I'll go now. I'll visit again in a fortnight. Better make it a couple of months, murmured the son. His mother acted as if she didn't notice. As soon as she left, the married couple exhaled a sigh of relief. Angela planned to clear the table, but her partner seated her on his lap and embraced her firmly. They sat like that for some minutes when the alarm sounded. Darling, exclaimed the woman. Oh, cut that, the husband replied lazily. Do you want me to handle him? Angela nodded in agreement and watched adoringly as Stas amused the little squirrel. The active creature clasped onto his shirt with its claws, climbed up to his shoulder, and then descended to his extended palms near his tummy. Hey, careful now, Stas chuckled, making a face. You'll gash me all over. I'll end up telling my colleagues I was enthusiastically playing with my spouse. The minuscule yet sharp claws slightly scratched his skin, causing discomfort. Therefore, the couple chose to wear outfits with long sleeves whenever they played with the infant squirrel. Their attire soon became a mandatory routine. They didn't interact with the furry baby without wearing a hoodie. The tiny being developed rapidly, its diet shifting from milk to seeds, nuts, and special rodent feed from the store. The squirrel spent most of its time outside its cage, springing onto curtains, scaling cabinets, and favoring naps in Stas's hood. He was continually fascinated by the tiny marvel and endeavored to tread lightly so as not to rouse the baby. A month later, the mother-in-law materialized at their threshold once more. This time, unexpectedly and with a homemade supper in tow. She headed straight into the kitchen, eyed the vacant cage, and signaled her approval, relieved they had evicted the pest-ridden creature. The squirrel chose that moment to introduce itself to the fresh face. It came from behind the curtain and flung itself into the woman's abundant hair. The mother-in-law screamed in astonishment, swung her head, and tried to shake the critter off with her hands. The terrified squirrel became entangled in her hair and squirmed in various directions. The married couple promptly sprang into action to assist the pet, delicately extricating the tiny being from the tangled mess her complex hairstyle had become. Angela and Stas concealed their smiles as the mother-in-law vehemently lamented the impropriety of having wild critters in the house. "Angela maliciously concocted this," the woman hollered. "She despises me. She acquired the squirrel to train it to attack ordinary folk." At this juncture, even Stas couldn't resist and chuckled. The upset woman spitefully seized the supper bag and made for the exit. "I won't grace this home with my presence again while that unhinged squirrel dwells here," she proclaimed, slamming the door. "You predicted issues because of her mindset about him." "Well, notice, the primary problem has lessened," Angela said to her husband. He promptly started laughing in reply. The critter expanded in size each week until it evolved into a mature squirrel. The partners had no intention of harboring the creature within their residence for its entire life. Thus, they refrained from refilling the redhead's dish with food for nearly 2 months. Nuts and seeds were stashed throughout the home, forcing the animal to forage for its own sustenance. The squirrel thrived at this task, scampering across all spaces like a small flash of lightning, achieving the feat of being in multiple locations simultaneously. It relished the hunt but didn't consume everything it discovered. The creature instinctively cached most of the food it unearthed. Initially, Angela noticed the soil in the flower pots had been dug up, but shortly after, tiny plants began to emerge from them. However, the surprises didn't end there. The squirrel hid nuggets of food in the homeowner's footwear, nestled within couch cushions, in piles of folded clothing, in the bed, the washing machine, and even under the carpet. This all seemed comical and fascinating at first, as they were curious to see what the animal would do next. However, the novelty soon wore off. Going to sit or lie down required a thorough check of all blankets and pillows. Dressing became akin to a treasure hunt. If they missed seeing a nut in the laundry, it would tint the entire load brown. What exacerbated the problem was the fact that the squirrel kept forgetting its secret stashes and would get overly excited every time it rediscovered them. This distraction led the couple to add child-proof locks to the cupboard doors and keep their bedroom locked. Despite numerous successful attempts at releasing the squirrel into the backyard, it preferred burrowing into Angela's hood, its sharp claws clinging tightly to her clothing. The squirrel seemed to have an unexplainable fear of open spaces or a lack of understanding of the freedom trees could bring. The thought of escaping didn't cross its mind. The couple had grown so accustomed to this behavior that one day they decided to take the small creature to the park, the same park where Angela had found it months prior. The squirrel journeyed in the comfort of Angela's hood the entire way. When they arrived and stood under the shadowy trees, the squirrel looked around with intense curiosity. Angela gently placed the baby squirrel onto a nearby branch. She held her breath as the baby hesitated, paced around, then energetically scampered up the trunk. Stas attempted to follow it from below, but soon lost sight of it. The squirrel disappeared through the leafy treetops as if it had never existed. The couple felt a tug at their heartstrings, both jubilant and anxious. They were glad the squirrel had returned to its natural home and seemed to have lost its fear of the outdoors, but they were nonetheless concerned about its safety. They continued to walk in the park for a while, scanning the trees for a glimpse of their cute, furry friend, but never saw the squirrel again. Days later, the small creature put all their worries to rest by appearing in their backyard. It nimbly descended from a tree and made a beeline for Angela's waiting embrace. The lady petted the tiny creature softly on its forehead, fussing over it affectionately. Stas offered a few nuts, and the squirrel chattered in pleasure, seizing a nut and swiftly stashing it under the yard shrubs, capturing the couple's interest with its antics. From that point on, the little critter became an occasional backyard visitor. It would show up about twice a week, prompting Stas to install a feeding station. The feeder was always stocked with seeds and nuts, ensuring the animal had a snack on hand, even if the homeowners weren't present. Stas's mother-in-law discovered the squirrel had returned to the wilderness. He claimed not to have informed his mother of this development, leaving him bewildered by her uncanny ability to know it all. Angela shot a disapproving glance at the neighbors, unable to think of any other way the news might have leaked. However, it was too late to remedy anything. The mother-in-law firmly notified her of her intentions to drop by for an evening visit. This announcement left Angela grumpy from dawn. She found herself quarreling with her husband and unfairly berating a workmate. Her job performance suffered, leaving her boss irritated by her lackluster output. To make matters worse, the university called to inform her of an error on her diploma. They had amended the error in the document, but printing and delivery would take time, much to Angela's frustration. She got home in a sour mood, feeling the urge to smash a pair of dishes to release her frustration. However, she needed to tidy up in preparation for her mother-in-law's impending visit. Angela stepped outside to clean the kitchen windows from the outside. A flustered Angela hastily put on her protective gloves. Due to her abrupt movements, the material ripped. Muttering to herself, she yanked off the fabric stuck on her glove and tossed it away. After washing the window, she noticed something was missing: her wedding ring. It was absent from her finger. She scanned the surroundings, but the golden band was nowhere in sight. Angela shook out the torn glove and combed through the grass on all fours, but her search was futile. Suddenly, her husband's words echoed in her mind. As long as she wore that ring, she was his lawful wife, and her mother-in-law held no power to belittle her. The day's disappointments crashed onto Angela all at once. Overpowered with despair, she broke down. Covering her face with her hands, silent tears coursed down her cheeks. Suddenly, she heard a familiar chirp nearby. Angela looked up and couldn't help but smile. There was a squirrel nearby, standing upright on its hind legs, its head cocked curiously. "Hello, little one." She gently patted its head. "I'm having a tough day. I even misplaced my ring. Isn't it hard to believe? I'm not sure what to do anymore." Angela showed the animal her empty finger. The squirrel sniffed at her hand curiously, likely searching for food. The woman sighed and stood up. There was just a single nut left in the feeder, so she headed to the kitchen to fetch more sustenance for the squirrel. In the process, while inspecting the food inventory, she unintentionally nudged a packet off the table. Grains and seeds scattered all over the floor, further souring her already gloomy mood. Grabbing a broom and dustpan, she began to clean the mess. While sweeping the last bits, she heard a tapping on the window. Puzzled, she drew back the curtain. A squirrel was on the windowsill, tapping rhythmically with its hind foot. She stepped outside. "What's up, little one?" she cried out. The squirrel hopped off the windowsill swiftly, ascended her pants, latched onto her sleeve, and started circling her arm. Angela extended her palm for the squirrel to perch on, but it gently dropped her missing wedding ring into her hand instead. Angela was ecstatic. She thanked the little creature, fed it the leftover food, and left the doors open in case it wished to wander in. By the time her mother-in-law came over, Angela had already cheered up. With the ring retrieved, everything else would work out. The mother-in-law sported her usual sour expression and discreetly glanced at Angela's finger, seemingly aware that the ring had been absent only half an hour earlier. Attempting to sit on the sofa, the mother-in-law was surprised when one of the cushions started to move. A small face, gripping a nut in its teeth, appeared from underneath it. "What's going on?" the mother-in-law shouted. "You've let it in," she pointed out. "Indeed, but he comes to visit," Stas replied cheerfully, fondling the creature behind its ear. "He makes regular visits, particularly in the late afternoons," Angela fabricated, hoping to achieve the desired result, which she did. Dismayed, the mother-in-law recoiled from the sofa. "They bring in all manner of debris," she grumbled. "I believe I should be on my way," forgetting her original intentions. "But aren't you staying for supper?" Angela teasingly added. "The little squirrel helped me get it ready." "Count me out," the mother-in-law declared while departing, slamming the door behind her. As the couple shared a warm grin, the little squirrel playfully darted around their feet, bringing laughter back into their home. With each visit, the creature became a symbol of resilience, teaching Angela and Stas the value of unexpected connections and the joy of nurturing life. Over the following weeks, Angela found herself more at ease. her worries about her mother-in-law's criticisms fading as the squirrel's antics filled their home with warmth. Stas's mother, upon hearing about the squirrel's frequent visits, expressed surprise but also a grudging admiration for the couple's ability to care for a wild creature. One afternoon, she surprised them with a visit, bringing homemade cookies and a genuine smile. "I suppose if you can look after a squirrel, you can manage a few dishes," she said, her tone softening. Stas exchanged a knowing glance with Angela, both relieved and hopeful that perhaps their relationship could evolve. The little squirrel, now a beloved part of their lives, continued to visit regularly, often perched on Angela's shoulder as she and Stas enjoyed their evenings together. The couple had created a nurturing environment, not just for the squirrel, but for their relationship too. As they watched the tiny creature scamper about, Angela realized that sometimes the most unexpected encounters could lead to profound changes, bridging gaps and healing old wounds. In nurturing the fragile life they had taken in, they found joy, unity, and a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they had embraced the beautiful chaos of life.